Pray that it works.
All right.
Let's just try to talk a little bit loud.
Let's get rolling, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
We're just gonna teach like this. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right.
Workshop's about to start. Today we're going to be talking about two very important things that are missing in your computer science curriculum. I want just 5 quick show of hands. How many of you guys are computer science? How many of you guys are IT? Computer engineering? Okay, cool. So in all these software related fields, we're always missing these two topics in our classes, such as version control and UNIX commands, which we will talk about a little bit later. So we wanted to take the time out today to just teach you guys about it a little bit, because it's very important to learn about version control in any software related project and some hardware projects as well. So before we get started, I would like to ask, if you haven't already, on your laptop, download VS Code and GitHub Desktop. These are very important tools that you will not only need on today's workshop, but you will also need those in moving forward with your career, moving forward with your classes. VS Code is a code editor that is extremely customizable, so it's very efficient for most software projects. And GitHub Desktop is going to be your best friend when it comes to version control for any software project. So here I have a few quick instructions on how to download it if you haven't already. I'm going to just leave those up there for a couple seconds and we'll start. Is everybody got that? Cool.
We good?
Okay, so just a quick introduction. My name is Juan Peñuela. I'm a senior in computer science. I interned at USA 2 times, and I'm also a software engineer incoming full-time at BNY.
And just a quick little intro. My name is Jefferson. I'm a third-year computer science major. I previously interned at New York Stock Exchange. I'm an incoming intern at Microsoft. Just a little fun fact: I speak 3 different languages. And if you want to connect with us on LinkedIn.
If you guys haven't already, we invite you to connect with us on LinkedIn. I'm just gonna leave those up there for a few minutes. Everybody good?
All right. We good? All right.
Okay, cool. So let's just go over a little bit of the agenda, what you guys are gonna actually learn today, what I hope you guys get out of this workshop. So first we're gonna learn about what is UNIX and why it is important to use UNIX commands in your software projects. We're gonna learn what is Git and why it is the most important tool in software projects for version control. We're gonna learn some key concepts of Git and GitHub. We're gonna learn what's different, the differences between Git and GitHub. And we're going to learn some key concepts of Git, such as branching, merging, rebasing, and a couple others. We're going to learn through a live demo how to create a GitHub repository and how to use it on your projects. And we're also going to learn how to collaborate with open source software projects using Git.
Alright, so let's first talk about Unix. Unix is an operating system that allows user to navigate through a directory and files. It is essential in software and development, cybersecurity, and system administration. And we're gonna show you guys some common command that you might use throughout your terminal, even for school project or further on for your future internship or full-time jobs, if possible. Let's see.
So over here we have some of the most common Unix commands. Now I do want you guys to keep in mind that Unix is a Linux-based terminal, and it is therefore compatible for those of you who have Mac and Linux computers. For Windows, it gets a little bit tricky because Windows has like 5 different terminals built in. So you have to just navigate a little bit more, make sure that you're using the right terminal so that these commands will be compatible. Because oftentimes they might not be, depending on the terminal that you're using.
Right.
And if you're interested in learning some more commands, more advanced commands, scan this QR code right here. It will take you to a website where you can learn a lot more.
Right.
So essentially what these commands do is they allow you to navigate through the files of your computer. Kind of like when you click on your Documents app and then you navigate through your folders. This is essentially what you can do from the command line. And the reason why this is so important in software projects is because a lot of the time you're going to be running that software from the terminal. So it is important that you're able to navigate your way through it fairly easily. So.
And if you have like a Windows computer, I believe if you have Git installed, the Git terminal is Unix based. So you can just fire that up if you have a Windows.
So let's just go over a couple of the commands here. How do I zoom into this? Okay, yeah, that works. Can everyone see what's on the terminal right now? Yeah, cool. So first couple commands from here, pwd, which is print the current path or the current directory. So let's go ahead and test that out. So pwd, we print enter, and then it shows us the path where we're in, which is the path of the track of directories that I've been going through. Now I can also use ls to list the current directory, so to see what folders and what files are available in the directory that I'm in. So if I do ls, it'll show me that I have applications, documents, library, development, and a bunch of other applications. And if we do cd and then a directory name, so if I do cd and then I input one of these names like documents or downloads or applications, then it'll take me to what I have on my computer. So let's go ahead and say cd documents. And by the way, this is case sensitive. So now if I do cd documents, it'll take me to cd documents. And let's say that I want to go back one directory, then I will use cd and then ... So let's see how that works. Cd ... and that'll take me back to the previous directory. Is there any questions so far? So let's see what other commands we have here. So there are more advanced commands right here for you to display files and contents, text editor. Sometimes you will be dealing with some very, very large files, not necessarily code. They might be CSV files. Let's say that you're training a large, machine learning model or an algorithm. You might be working with a CSV file that contains millions and millions of entries. So sometimes having things like head that shows the first lines of the file is useful, or the last 10 lines of the file, that is also useful. So we can create an empty file by using touch. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna say touch, and then I'm gonna say myfile.txt, because I'm just gonna create this as a text file. You have to be aware of the extension. If you want to do a Java file, then you will do .java, or you will do .py for Python, and so on. So now you created a text file, and we can open it on the directory that we found it. So I think this should be somewhere in my desktop.
Can you do ls as well?
OS?
ls.
LS?
Yeah.
So, oh yeah. So this is, if I do ls to navigate through the directory, it shows me myfile.txt has been created right there. We can also create folders using Unix commands. We can also remove files. Let's try removing that file that we just created. So I'm going to say rm and then myfile.txt. And again, this is one is case sensitive, and two, you have to input the extension that you're working with. So if I do rm myfile.txt, it will remove it. And now I'm just gonna go ahead and punch in ls to see what's actually here, and then we see that myfile.txt is gone. And that's how you will create files from the command line. You guys have any questions? Okay.
All right, so now moving on to like kind of like the second part of our workshop. What is Git? So Git is like a open source version control system. It's used by many companies out there to help them track their code and versions of their code as they push more production build onto that certain product or projects. And it allows developers to have efficient collaborations where they could work on a project simultaneously through that version control system. It also helps developers to track the history of their code, whereas the commit history will show using GitHub, which we will cover later on, will show that which developer has made certain contribution to that repository. And lastly, it allows rollback. Has anyone heard of the story where like there's an intern, they push some code randomly to production and they break the entire system? Which that happens quite often than you think. Me, myself, I almost accidentally deleted an entire database, so I'm just letting you know that. But it allows rollback where if any certain code pushed out there and it caused a big trouble, we can always roll back to a previous version, which was working perfectly fine before we push that code. And the main difference between Git and GitHub, which a lot of people think they're similar, but Git is immersion control system. It helps us manage the code history, and it can be entirely used locally. Whereas compared to GitHub, it's a cloud-based hosting service for Git repository. A kind of analogy that I like to use is that Git is kind of like your local file directory. So like if you open Finders, if you're on Mac, or if you're on Windows, that would be like files. And where GitHub is kind of like Google Drive. Or if you guys use OneDrive, that's kind of like the cloud hosting service that hosts all your files on there. And next up, some of the key concepts we're gonna go over. First of all, repository. A repository is like a folder that stores all your code on GitHub. And commit, like I say, commit is like a snapshot of your code. For example, you change X amount of lines in this repository and you make a commit, and this commit will show the amount of stuff you changed. It has a unique ID as well to help you further document the changes you made. And branching, so branching is kind of like you're making like a tree. Like for example, you have a tree branch and you start growing outward. But it creates a separate version of your code for bug fixes or adding a new feature so that the main branch wouldn't break from your changes. So it's kind of like you're creating a copy of your code and you can just kind of mess around with it. And if that branch gets messed up, you can delete that branch from there on. And lastly, merging. So let's say you create a new branch and you added a new feature, you fix some bug, and you run some tests through it. You're like, okay, this is working perfectly fine. Now let me push that back to our main branch, which is a concept of merging. You're merging your created copy back to the original version of your code.
So just to give you guys a quick visual, I'm not sure, can you all see over here? But I'm trying to draw.
I don't see the words, but yes.
Okay, let me just, can you turn the lights on?
Yeah, I got you.
So let's say that this is you, and this circle represents your repository on Git. Generally, they're named one of two ways, especially when we're talking about the main source where the code comes from. That is either going to be main or master. That is up to you, whatever you want to call it. And now let's say that you're working on a feature. Let's say you're working on a login button. So we're going to create a new branch, which is going to be here. Okay, this sucks. So yeah, let's say you're creating a new branch, and then this is going to be your login button. So you're going to say login. And then instead of working directly on the main function, which might or might not be deployed to a server that might have real users at stake, you're rather working on a copy of that code that is easier for you to manage, and you can modify whatever you want on that code without putting at risk your company or your project or your users. So you're going to be working on this instead. But now let's say that your friend is also working on the same project, but instead of working on the login button, he's working on the register page, right? So he's also going to create a copy right here from the main branch, and we're going to call this register. And now you guys are working on two copies of the main branch. And once you guys are done, you're going to create what is called a pull request. And a pull request basically means it's a request to merge your changes on your local copy to the main branch or to another source branch. So you put a pull request right here. This is gonna go back to main. And then once your friend is done working on this version of the code, he will do the same thing. And now the main branch will have the two features. So this is the main concept of collaboration using Git and GitHub. This is all the Git system. GitHub is just to host your files and to host your code and your repository. You guys have any questions on how branch works? How branching works, how collaboration works using Git?
Any questions so far?
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
You got it? Is that me? I see.
No, you got
All right.
you got this one.
All right. So we're gonna go over some basic Git commands. So if we look at it, the first one is git init. This is how you would create a repository from scratch in your terminal. And git clone. On GitHub, you can find when you click on, there's a little green button on the top right corner of your repository. You could click on it and it should provide you SSH or URL. And once you hop on your local machine, and you can use git clone and paste that URL or SSH into your terminal, that allows you to clone the repository in your local machine. And Git different, it shows the differences from the current version to our previous version of the file. So that allows you to figure out okay, what kind of changes did I make? Do I need to revert any of the changes? And Git checkout is how we create a new branch. So if you look at it, Git checkout, if we put -b flag, that will take you to your new branch while creating a new one. And if you just use Git checkout alone, that would just simply create a new branch, but it will keep you on the old version of the branch. And Git pull, which is what will pull all the remote code in the repositories. Let's say your teammate, like one described over there, your teammate is finished with the register button. He pushes his code onto the repository, and you're on your local machine, you're not gonna have that register function unless you run git pull, which will pull that register function into your local machine, then you will have the same capability.
So this is just another kind of explanation of branching, which I already kind of explained there. So basically, when you work on a software project, you often collaborate with other engineers. If you guys have internships, you have probably collaborated with your mentors, you have probably collaborated with other people, other developers in your team. But how do you work together at the same time without affecting the project, which is pretty much what I explained over there. Now we have another concept that we want to introduce. It's called rebasing. So rather than just branching out of your project to do your own work, you will stay in one version of the application and then stack a bunch of features on top of it, and then you can roll this back. This is a little bit more complex it's a little bit more complex than branching generally, and for most projects, branching works just fine. This is for companies when they're trying to speed develop an application, or they're trying to do some sort of crazy work without leaving out the possibility of rolling back their code. So if I develop 5 features right here, but then those features crash down my whole site, then I can easily roll back. And another feature that rebasing offers is you can have a clean history of the commits that you're making to each branch, and this is what allows developers to know which version to roll back to. So now let's just go really quick over the details of what a pull request is. Okay, so this is the book definition from the GitHub docs. A pull request is a proposal to merge a set of changes from one branch into another, like I explained. But creating pull requests has a few components to it. The first one is the notifications. So GitHub does allow you to have a bunch of different integrations. My favorite one is the Discord webhook. So if you're working on a project with a bunch of friends, or maybe even at a real company, You can set up notifications for whenever a new branch is created, for whenever a branch is deleted, for whenever somebody makes a push, and it just kind of helps everybody stay updated and on top of the project. A pull request also opens a discussion post, kind of like the ones you do in your classes. You know, those annoying ones where everybody agrees with you. But it does open a discussion post where developers normally talk about features and how the new changes affected old code and how the new code can provide value or not. So basically just a discussion post where all the collaborators and all the stakeholders are able to comment on that set change. And then you can follow up with the commits because again, a pull request belongs to one branch. So you can follow up with the commits that you're doing previously onto that branch.
And we're gonna do some live demonstration right now. So we're gonna be demoing GitHub Desktop, which is a very useful tool on your local machine. Instead of going through a terminal line, type in all those commits, git clone, git add, git commit, git push. You could just use GitHub Desktop to do everything, where it will allow you to do easy cloning and check your branches. Like it helps you visualize it a lot better compared to terminal line, in my opinion. And it also helps you switch between repository very, very easily. So I'm gonna demonstrate how to create a repository brand new from the GitHub Desktop. Let's see, we're gonna go over here. So now we have our GitHub Desktop opened up right over here. Let me know if you guys can't see.
Turn off the light.
Turn off the light. Let me just try to make it bigger. Can you guys see okay? So, how will we do it? So let me just kind of give you some walkthrough on kind of like the layout of this. As you can see what branch you want right over here. And you can see the published branch over here and what repository you're currently on. This is our public NiHacks workshop repository. And you can see that over here, you can see the history of this repository where, like we mentioned before, it allows developer to see what code changes has been made and what kind of error could possibly happen by tracking down the history of all the commits. So now let's go ahead and make a new repository, and we can hit add. You can see that we have option to either clone a repository if there's already one, or you can create a repository from scratch, or you can add an existing repository from your local machine. So let's go ahead and create a new repository. Name, I'm just gonna call it Git Workshop. Git Workshop. Description is usually, and you could pick your local path and where this folder or repository will live. Usually you will want to have, like, for example, for my classes, I have like a classes folder, and under this classes folder, I will have each class as a folder itself. And within the class folder, I'll have like project 1, project 2, project 3. That's how I kind of structure my local path, and you could choose that. But in this case, I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in desktop on Juan's computer.
Give me a second. So I just want to go quickly over a couple more options that GitHub offers. I'm sure some of you guys have already worked with GitHub, but I want to make sure that we get the most content out of this. So generally, git ignore, you can add a git ignore, which is a file that gets added into that repository, and whatever files are listed in that .git ignore file, like the name indicates, they will be ignored whenever you make a push to the main branch, right? So that code doesn't get published in the cloud. And the reason why this is very, very important, and why some of your projects should be using a git ignore, especially if you're using, let's say that I'm making a really cool application, it's a ChatGPT wrapper, but I have my own ChatGPT API key. I don't want to publish that into a public repo, because if people find that API key, they can just use it, and and that API key will just charge my account.
Right.
So that's one of the uses for the git ignore. Another use could be creating environment variables. So if I'm hosting it in the server, and then that server gives me a key, then that's another key that I need to protect, right? So just be mindful that this git ignore is very, very useful. It will keep your privacy, and it will protect you. So just make sure you use it. And licenses is basically whatever other software your repository will be associated with. generally software for like project management, like Jira, and stuff like that. Your repository can be associated to.
Yep.
And last but not least, we have initialized this repository with a README. A README is generally a set of instructions that you should be adding to all your GitHub repos, to all your projects, especially if you want people to collaborate to that project, because you want to give instructions on how to clone your project and how to run your project on a local machine, right? Like I said, let's say that I ignored a bunch of API keys here. So instead of giving them my API key so they can use it for free, I ignore this file, and in the README, I can add an instruction that says, make sure you add your own API key, right? So they can still contribute to the project without affecting my privacy.
Right.
Any questions so far?
All right, so let's go ahead and create the repository. So now, as you see, we are currently in the Git workshop repository, and we can see that we only have one branch right now, which is the main, because we haven't created any new branches yet. So let me show you through terminal, which is what we just learned. So we can see that, let's go and run out. I'm gonna run clear. Clear is a command line that helps you clear out your current screen. So in this case, like makes it less cluttered. So from what we learned earlier, ls shows all the directory. So we see that, remember we put it under the desktop directory. So let's use the command line cd desktop. And a fun thing about Unix is you don't have to type in everything. There's a feature called tab to complete. So in this case, if I only have D, I hit tab, it shows me all the options that associated with D. So in this case, we have desktop, document, downloads. But let's say we hit E and we hit tab again, you see that it auto-completed for me. I don't have to type in desktop word as a whole, right? So that makes your development process a lot quicker instead of typing in everything. Let's say you have a really, really long folder name. So let's go ahead and move into desktop, and we can see that our Git workshop is right over here. So let's go ahead and go into Git workshop, and let's see, hopefully you have that. Okay, so it doesn't, but let's go back to our PowerPoint. This is the next thing I'm gonna show you, which is VS Code. VS Code is one of the most popular IDE out there. I believe there's also other popular IDEs such as IntelliJ, if you guys use that for Java. Eclipse also is for Java, but only the ancient fossils use that. But if you use it, no shame, but I like IntelliJ a lot better for Java. But Git has a built-in integration with VS Code where allows you to push and create branches and check your commit history directly within VS Code instead of running through command line. And I'm going to show you how to do that with the repository we just created. Let me go ahead and fire up VS Code. All right, VS Code. Let's see, hopefully launch this up. All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and make this bigger. Oh, shoot. Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and we're gonna open folder, which we're gonna navigate to. Why is it not working? It might be weird. Yo, Juan, this is not working. Why is it doing this? Okay. Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna do it right here. See if this works.
Actually,
Okay, perfect.
It's a lot easier if you guys actually go on GitHub Desktop
Yeah.
and just click Open with VS Code. Just click on GitHub Desktop.
Get this up.
Yep. And just click Open in Visual Studio Code, and it'll do all of that stuff.
Never mind.
You don't have to navigate through your files or anything. Like I said, it is a really nice tool to have, and all those commands that we were teaching you earlier for git clone, git commit, and all that stuff, that is stuff that back in the day, it used to be done in the terminal.
Right.
Because there was no such tool. But in this day and age, we have GitHub Desktop, which is why we highly encourage that you use it. Because it will save you so much time. It's so much easier to visualize a bunch of stuff. And there's just no point in using the terminal in this day and age. unless you're like debugging something.
Right. So you see that we have the README file that we included earlier. So let's just do a quick description of this workshop. This is the workshop for NIAX, right? NIAX. All right, so now we go over here. So this little icon right here, you see source control. That is the Git built-in integration with VS Code that allows you to track and all your branches. So in this case, let's go ahead and publish our branch real quick, because right now we only have this repository on our local machine. It is not in the cloud at all yet, so nobody can see it besides you on this computer until you publish this branch.
Before you do that, remember, you have to save your file. If you see
Right.
that little white dot up there on top of the file, that means that you haven't saved it.
Right.
So just make sure you do Command S if you're a Mac or Control S if you're on Windows.
So let's show how we would do that through our terminal. So let's see. So you could run git status to see what file. So on branch main, nothing to commit. So let's see. I think you
You
need.
haven't saved it.
Yeah. I haven't saved it. Do you not have autosave on?
No.
Oh.
Just Command S.
All right. Cool.
There you go.
All right. So now we save that, and you see how like we modify our
You see-
README file right
You see
here.
that M that just popped up there? It means modified.
Yep.
I think. So, that's another way to keep track of which files are getting changed within
Right.
VS Code itself.
So you see how like we modify README right here. So let's just go ahead and add that. So we could do git add period. This adds all your modified files into your commit at the moment. You can also do that individually by adding their file name behind git add. So for example, you git add register.js or login.js. You only want to push one of the feature at a time, but git add dot will add everything you change within your local machine at the moment into that one singular commit. But in this case, we only have one file, as you can see through git status. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use this command to add everything. So now let's run the commit, git commit -m, and this is a flag that allows you to commit a message to your commit. So usually you wanna do this because you don't wanna just send a commit without a message, because most of the time that will probably get rejected because they don't wanna spend time, look through your code and see what you did. You wanna make sure you tell them exactly what you did, and so they can look at your code and be like, okay, this is working correctly with what they described when you open up a pull request, right? This is what the person who's approving that pull request would see under your message. So in this case, change README file, right? And we see that one file change, one insertion. So we see this is our, remember, I said that the commit has their unique ID. So you see that right there. That's the unique ID that each commit would have. And you can better visualize this on the GitHub website directly. And now let's try to push this. And git push origin main. Usually you will push to individual branch if you have extra branch. But in this case, we only created one main branch because we haven't have any working code yet. So we're just gonna go ahead and directly push that to main since it's just description file. So yeah, you gotta publish this branch first. I'm gonna publish that. All right. So once we publish that, we can just go ahead and push this code. And we see that everything's up to date. So everything has been published. So let me go ahead, hop on Chrome and show you guys directly through GitHub.
You can just find the repository, right?
Yep. So we call that workshop, Git workshop. So you see that right here, we changed our commit a minute ago, right here. So now let's do, so you see how like you do that through command line, you have to type in all that command. So let's use, let's go ahead and use that right here, and let's create some new files. What's y'all's favorite language to use? Do we have Python? Python? So everyone likes Python. All right. So let's have a Python file, test.py, and we can just print let's do hello world, right? So as you see over here, we can see that within the Git integration in VS Code, you see that what kind of changes you made. And I like this a lot better because this visualizes what kind of changes you exactly did. So you see on the left, it's before, and on the right is after. So you see how like we added hello world. But what if you have multiple files, right? So let's add another Python file, test2.py, and let's call this I love NiHacks. Right. So let's go back here. So you see that we have 2 files currently in our VS Code terminal. So you can exactly select what you want to push and what you don't want to push. So you see this little addition that stages your change into your commit. Let's say you edit many files. You don't want to go through the command line and try to figure out, okay, what did I exactly edit, right? You can just visualize it right here, and you can click on each one of them and see what kind of changes you made before, after, right? And you can stage it line by line. You don't have to do it this as a changes of the entire file. Let's say you edit multiple line over here, but you only want certain line to go into the repository. You can add it individually through here. So in this case, let's just do hello world first. So we're gonna stage this change right here, right? So we have that change stage. And we can write a message over here. Like I say, messages are very important for other developer to see your code changes and what did you do. So I'm just gonna say added hello world file, right? And we can go ahead and commit that change. So you see that, oh, we forgot to save it. We didn't just hit commit. So we committed that change right here. So you see that test2 that we didn't commit, I love NiHacks, but hello world is already within our commit. So now we could just push it from over here. And let's go back to our Google file. And let's go ahead and change it. And we see that our newly added test.py file right over here in our repository. So that's how you would use Git integrated with VS Code, which I think it's a lot better than using terminal line just because it allows you to visualize those changes you did and allows you to select individual changes you did if you want to. And some of the best practices and tips when coming to software development and using GitHub repository, you want to make sure you commit often. You don't want to send a commit that has 4,000 lines of changes. Then that person who's approving that pull request, they're going to have to scroll through that 4,000 line to see what you did. And that's likely going to cause issue in your actual project that's deployed because you have such a big change. It's kind of like shoving an elephant into a refrigerator. You want to make sure you break down your code into small parts. For example, individual function you change or individual feature you change, commit those and push it. For example, let's say you're tasked with creating a login website. You want to break it down into the login container. Let's say you have a password encrypted function. You want to break it down to sub features and then commit them. Use feature branches. Like Juan said, you don't want to use one singular branch like your main for everything. You want to make sure you branch out. That allows you to structure your code very, very efficiently. And rebase often. Rebase is kind of like we said, it's a more complicated feature to use compared to merging. I would say just go ahead and branch more often. Every individual feature, have a new branch for it. Resolve conflict early. If you see a comment on your pull request, your teammate is telling you, be like, hey, this is gonna cause a segment fault in C. Like, let's say you're writing a C file. You don't wanna let that sit there and marinate, and next thing you know, you fix something, you push it. The moment that PR gets approved, everything's gonna collapse. Then it's gonna start a chain reaction, and it's gonna be hard for you to solve that issue. So whenever you see an issue, make sure to resolve that early, and then go ahead and work on your new feature. Always test locally. Whenever you're testing locally, it avoids breaking everybody else's code when you push it to remote, right? So if you break something locally on your computer, you can simply just delete that branch and make a new one. That's the perks of having extra branches. It's that if you mess up something, you can always cut that and have a new one. Avoid force pushing. Let's say something is not working correctly, and then you're like, oh, I still want to push it to main because my deadline is Friday, right? But if you did that, chances are, if your code has an issue, it's gonna break everything else. So if you force push it, sometimes end of the world.
So before we move on to types of collaboration in GitHub, I want to just quickly talk about a concept that happens a lot and that people tend to freak out about a little bit over this, and it's called merge conflicts. So basically, let's say that you are pushing a library or a dependency to a main project that is using, I don't know, Python version 3.1, and then your friend is trying to push his work, but his is version 3.1.2. However, main can only contain one of those two versions because they can't have both versions at the same time. That wouldn't make any sense. That would crash the code, right? So then GitHub will generate what is called a merge conflict, and they will and GitHub will tell you, hey, this line is not the same as this, and it will give you the option to edit in VS Code or even in GitHub itself. It will give you the option to choose which of these two lines you actually want to keep, and you can be like, okay, I want to go with the latest change. So we're not gonna keep this one. We're not gonna keep this version, but we're gonna keep this one. So this is the one that's gonna get pushed to main, and we're gonna discard this one. That's how you solve merge conflicts. It doesn't sound like the end of the world. It sounds like a very simple concept, and it really is. However, when you're doing web servers or when you're working in bigger projects, this can actually become a problem because the settings on your web host or server, they can be different, and you need to make sure that you always have the correct setting. Now, let's talk about a little bit of types of collaboration in GitHub. So there's three types that I want to go over. The first scenario is where you're the owner of the repo. Like Jeff just created his own repo, so now he owns that repo. He can do whatever he wants with it. He can create branches, he can delete branches. He can even transfer ownership of that repo to somebody else. He can add people to help him collaborate with that repo. He has full authority over what happens on that repo. Now, next scenario is when you're the collaborator on that repo. Let's say that Jeff added me onto that repo. I have certain permissions as a collaborator, but I can't just sabotage the whole project and go delete the repo because it is not mine, it is Jeff's. He's the only one who has the authority to do that. Another reason why you will want to have those protections in place is to avoid people from pushing to main or the master branch. And the reason sometimes people put branch protection rules is because, like I said, sometimes projects get deployed directly from a GitHub repository. So when they do, they need to make sure that the web server is not going to go down, or the project is not going to go down. So he will have a protection rule where he has to revise my code before he allows the merge. And now the last scenario is called forking. So let's say that you're working on an open source project. So I guess the latest example that I can think of is DeepSeek, because it's an open AI model that can that you can just clone locally in your computer, and if you have a decent GPU, you can run it. So you're not a collaborator, and you're also not an owner, right? But the repo is publicly available. So instead of creating a copy by branching, you create a copy of the repo by forking. And that essentially creates a version on your computer of the public open source software that you can work on. And when you fork the repository, you're also allowed to create pull requests. So you're also allowed to contribute to the big project, even if you don't know the owner, because like I said, this is generally used for open source projects. So if you want to contribute a feature for an open source project, you can create a pull request, and the admins of that repo or that project, they will revise your pull request, they will revise your changes, and if they think that is a valuable feature that they can add to the main project, then you know, they can merge it for you, and you will have just collaborated into a big project.
Do we have any questions so far about anything we cover, such as the live demo portions or type of collaboration in Git? Very good. All right, so we're gonna go into our first activity of the day. You're gonna go ahead and create your own repository either through the command lines we show or using GitHub Desktop like we demonstrated earlier. Create your own repository, make an initial commit with a README file, includes your name, today's date, what is your next project idea. And I want you to use this repository for whatever your next project idea it might be. So let's go ahead and do that.
Just raise your hand if you actually want to participate in this, because I know a bunch of you guys are GitHub experts. So, okay, 1, 2, 3.
We got a couple.
We got a couple.
So-
Okay, so yeah, we'll just give it like 10 minutes.
10 minutes-ish. We're just gonna be walking around. If you guys have any questions, you need help, or whatever type of question you want to ask us, just feel free to raise your hand and we'll walk over to you.
Yeah. Got it.
Okay, so there's three steps. So right now you're trying to so it's just committing. Remember I showed you need to make sure commit first. So that's what it's doing.
Sorry, I didn't know. So I need my GitHub account. Yeah. I need to add it to the
So you see how like it's like so now that you so if you subtract it
What's that? Yes. Let me see. So, is your name, date, and what is your next project idea?
What were you saying about the project? Are we doing the lab?
publish it either privately or publicly. So privately only you can see that.
Okay, okay. Alright. I'll do it
Publicly
privately.
is like
Okay, and I can change that.
yeah, you can change that later on. You got it, private. So like let's say you have a school project.
Okay, yeah.
Update the app.
This is just like a lot of initial setup. So that's a GitHub. GitHub is a service.
Okay.
Git is all that controlling that. So if I did that, just go back to your.
Oh,
So everything's down. Status.
And then if I like write a print it.
Right, then it will tell you like you change this.
Oh, okay.
So you can try that. Let's try that. So you see how like right there, just how
Yeah.
you change that.
At least figure out
You're like the busiest.
What? What do you mean?
You are the busiest. Yeah, you know, I'm the freak. Oh, you already had it to read? Yeah. A license. Wait, what? That is so.
Listen, I talk too much. I should have but I was talking with my I am actually okay, but I have to do this one. I don't know if I'll have to but basically he said it's before
So you don't have to do
every
So for example,
Oh, you're gonna go to
you're gonna go to the website like whichever one you want to like Microsoft anyway, oh no,
I've already applied something.
okay, applying to
so they will generate.
I'm gonna literally write it out.
That's their here's my ID. I have to add it to your account so that if you recognize this ID, then I can. So
They only had 60 applicants.
So now let's say you have friends. They don't have to get on. Then you want to ask them to generate. But you don't have to.
Yeah, it would be a hard.
But if they have to get on the account, you simply just add them as a collaborator. How's everyone
All right,
doing?
y'all.
Good?
Now, I have a second assignment for you guys today.
For those of you who wish to participate, we're going to be contributing to a repo that I created. So I would like for you guys to, I don't know, what's the right word for this? Would it be clone or would it be fork?
Fork.
Fork, why?
Yeah, it should be fork.
Why?
Wait, what was the question?
If I'm asking you guys to clone this repo, would I be asking you to clone it or am I asking you to fork it?
What would you want me to do?
I just want you to clone it in your computer.
Wait, if you want me to clone it, do I clone it?
I mean, yeah, it's probably fork, but like.
I want you to create a copy of this repo on your local machine. Fork it? Fork it? Why?
It's public.
There you go.
Public, and you're not a collaborator.
And you're not a collaborator, right? So I want you guys to please fork this repo for those of you who wish to participate. And we're gonna make kind of the same thing we made with Jeff's assignment. I just wanna have your name, today's date, and a project that you're looking forward to, and then create a pull request. Just so that I can, and then I'll merge all of those pull requests to this repo. So just raise your hand if you're actually participating in this. Yeah, sure, go for it. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, from 2 to 6, I'm okay. technically has two, but it's
It is a lot more than the first one.
I can also do Monday to Friday. Saturday, Sunday, I can make it.
Wait. This week?
And this entire semester.
Well, are we doing this week?
No, we have at least one week.
We're doing the SMO.
Yes, okay.
It's
I know.
Thursday. Yeah. Better not be Friday.
Or talk about that, so.
Oh, the
Yeah, I'm wrong. Oh. So you went to Iceland?
once, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe, what about like conferences, like? How do you get your citizenship?
I applied.
Huh?
I think it's
I mean,
That's fine.
no, I'm gonna.
do like a little something really quick.
I can.
No worries.
No, you can erase that. It's fine.
But a lot of time I just apply to more user as my first option. Like I never even touched like Meta, Microsoft. I didn't even bother to apply because I know I wasn't gonna hit it for my first year. So I targeted more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just put it up on the screen.
I just got like but it was they had a Jacksonville branch. So I just like kind of look around Orlando, look around Jacksonville, see like is there a company I want to work for? I just hop on their site, I just put in an application. I got some interview, I also got a lot of rejection. It's about the amount of applications.
It looks good, like the design is very
No, I was just talking to them about the project.
I don't know the first one.
Is it 4 or 3 that you're supposed to do?
Yes, work it, changes, and create a folder. Because you're not collaborating.
Thank God. Come on. Thank you so much for this workshop.
Yeah, this is.
Like, I just learned so much about
I'm gonna be looking at chessboard.
Like it's helpful if you know.
The best
Also find how it's
I am, listen, I was
So this one, what is your each time so these are your iterations. You have that,
once I'm done with this, I'm gonna say the only reason I did this is my contract.
So actually,
He's weaponizing his incompetence. Giving me a shot that was working on my code. And I have to change it. Either I just manage basically. I tell him to do this like once a year,
Yo.
That's more? So now that we have here.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
He enabled this file, it's like, why didn't it run it? He didn't even set it up.
So it's right here?
He just put
Yeah.
Yo.
lines and
I'm asking.
Oh, no problem. You got it. You just have to generalize the problem. So what happens every single time?
So what's the
That's for sure.
I can choose my schedule. I just know after this project I should go find. I'm not doing fun for the second project. That's
That's not, no, it's not. Well, this is.
how long is it?
Yeah.
I want to go down this way. Let's head to the
This is for the one.
So what about at the top? No, so what about at the top? It's this, what about at the top? That's not right.
What's happening every time? Okay, so it's 4 squared, it's 4 cubed.
Oh, it's increasing.
So what is it? 4 to the K.
Plus 1.
Yo, let's take a photo. Are you drove over right now?
This is literally, she just learned it.
Wait, but you said.
But I have a test on it.
You had like a lead worker? Oh, yeah.
All her questions are.
Who applied for that?
You finish this. You got this one?
It's still gonna be a copy until he approves it. His code is not organized. You would be sitting. He's creating his pull.
Okay, you can leave it out.
I could do Sunday. I could do Saturday.
Give me 1 second.
Do the Sunday like afternoon. I'll see, I'm not thinking
There's a conflict.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, when you say conflict, that's just syntax error. It's just like a syntax error.
All right, y'all. So
To the one person who actually participated in this activity, thank you very much. I see your pull request. Can you raise your hand if you put that pull request in?
Give him a clap, guys.
okay, that's the only pull request. I didn't get yours. Sorry. So now that he put in a pull request, me as the owner of this repo, I'm able to see it, and I can see what he did. So I'm gonna go to his commit history, and he added a print statement, right? So let's check that out. And I see that on this code, on this file, he added I1 projects. So I think that's a very valuable contribution to this project. So I'm just gonna review his changes. I'm going to approve of this pull request. And once I do that, then I'm able to merge the pull request. I'm just gonna confirm the merge. And now that is done, I can go back to my code, and I can see that I have this on my main repo, even though you weren't a collaborator of it. So you contributed to an open source project. This is how you would go about doing that in real life. But that is all I have to teach y'all today, I think. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So thank you all very much for coming. If you have any questions, I'll be here for a few minutes. We'll be here for a few minutes. Any questions? Again, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn.
Does it have to be about this workshop, whatever you guys want?
About the workshop or about whatever you guys want to talk about. We'll both be accepting any LinkedIn requests that come in after today's workshop.
Honestly, you guys are like the main aspect of the workshops, because obviously I'm teaching most of the you didn't get the best on probably code directly. It's just my first time. I don't know like all the procedures or all that, but I don't want to learn.
Realistically, do
Oh wait, that's a platform. The one that was when we first participated.
Wait, how does Python work?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah,
Why is it yellow?
Oh, it's yellow.
Are you first year?
So you have to add steps to the you have to stage it. So I get add. Remember what they said? I get add. Probably one tomorrow.
Okay, so they're doing
something a lot more.
I think that
No, this is, so you wanna do, you wanna do get add, and then you can go. You talk about, yeah. So, where's your time? Oh, okay, yeah. And the gift of this.
iPad they should have.
Yeah.
The fire actually getting hot. Wait, how are you gonna pick up transfer system?
Alright.
How you feeling about the class?
You know,
Like, I heard doing like, I heard doing
Get
marketing.
space, yeah.
It's just like, living and learn this, right?
That's true.
So that's why we have to be able to this for, I mean, at this point, like,
I feel
it
that.
is love
Space
to
stuff.
like, I
Yeah.
can do hard, like, not like, they want
No, get add, space dot.
So,
Dot, yeah, like that. People just want to start now to get like into that part. You need like a small piece. And then add this is space. Dash it. Space. Quotes. But the whole system of like has subtitles for each word. And that's the whole time. It kind of, I doubt we can make one that just says like nothing to do with tech interview or anything like that. I look at that. Oh, I think we also. It's difficult.
honestly, I was thinking, that is the truth. I would. But you want to shut up, but. That's the one that you like. I'll actually read you like this. Like you didn't have it.
Go back to your
He uses that. They didn't like actually. I use it.
You're supposed to make a bridge.
Oh, I did.
Wait, no.
On your phone, should you forked it? Okay, real quick. Just to, go back to like command.
But now, like, actually,
It just applies. I try to think about ways to take football because I did today, right? Like they can't find stuff and all that.
at this point, like, I always see most people.
Workshops are like,
That is real. Honestly, I can't do something like. It's, you got it. Okay, anytime, the whole thing, like,
yeah.
when you go in for your position, that's why most of the it is, that is like that. Go in, feel like all the what the feel like everyone's door, how they how we go.
Now, back to your
How does
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so it's an hour.
Yeah, no, because if you guys have like income streams, that's like, oh, if you have like, change the base for Amazon, like, maternity or something like that, it could help people want to come in, because they're like, damn, they have to put
Yeah, there's a first three, we were waiting for the shit, check it, was that third one, yeah, first try. Yeah, it's missing the one from your branch.
Yeah, what we're saying is we didn't want to listen to the branch. Like, go back to your fishes, obviously they might come in expecting scientific or
Oh,
something.
yeah,
I mean, realistically, we're probably not, we could.
That's like kind of the.
I think it's a good idea, I just don't think, it's really loud, but I can see it's really big stuff.
I just think realistically,
I'll go back to our office. Yeah.
you can't write it like, at least especially as a class. If you can't write it, like, you can make it like, then they'll be. If you can't solve it, you don't have to have it.
Darkest night.
Well, yeah, that's how you make it. That's true.
Yo, wait, what? Like, QCS?
Because we could try to. Yeah, because most of the people that are gonna see through Discord.
Even though you guys took the chills, I did go over to the. I want to burn it. I just call it that.
And it's not on Instagram too, like the class.
I already know the questions, like, they're all like very similar.
Yeah. I'll put in the workshop chat then.
You say on kids.
You know, we kill that soccer. Yeah, nobody knows.
I'm signed till I graduate. Yeah, no, I'm doing the same thing. Honestly, I'm not trying to work on it later. Obviously, at work, you're supposed to do it for workshops or like events. And you just gotta pull from them sometimes. You guys were recording.
I did.